President Muhammadu Buhari has signed the 2018 budget into law. This comes 7 months after he presented the 2018 appropriation bill before the National Assembly.
Well, the president expressed his reservations about the changes made in the budget by the National Assembly. The budget for major infrastructure projects across the country was cut by about 347 billion naira. An action President Buhari says will make his administration unable to implement key projects. All right, we're being joined from our Abuja studio by leading development economist, Professor Ken Ife. Good morning and thanks for joining us this morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for inviting me. But please increase the volume.
Okay, we're going to try as much as we can. What do you make of President Buhari's reservations about the changes, the amendments, infusions that have been done by the National Assembly, but still has gone ahead to sign the 2018 budget into law?
Well, President Buhari is actually entitled to feel the way he felt and very angry, and it's very, very understandable. But I'd like to take you back. For the last 6 years, I've been warning all the presidents. I've written to President Buhari himself. I've written to President Jonathan, the Vice President, the Assembly, Senate President. Then I have done that, asking them on 2 counts. One, to please, like gentlemen, go to Supreme Court to make a determination on the extent to which the Assembly can deconstruct your budget and then reconstruct it by putting things into the budget. Secondly, was an appeal to the federal government to please do quarterly reports on budget and publish those so that the Assembly will have 3 occasions to go and monitor and oversight on your project, so that when you now bring your project in October, November, they will not be so protracted a delay. Now, the federal government has done the second one, and you see the routines are posted. But there is the second issue. I keep asking the Assembly, why are you not taking advantage? They say it's monetary release issues and all that. But let's come to the issue. We have a constitutional crisis. And people must understand that we have a deep constitutional crisis. We have actually 2 separate governments running in the country. And it comes down to, what does the law say? The law intends both parties to work together. If you look at the Fiscal Responsibility Act, it places several limits on budgetary matters. You cannot exceed, first of all external borrowings must be for capital project. Your debt servicing should not be more than 3% of the GDP. There are levels of debt. So all of those are already in the Constitution. Then secondly, the Constitution provides for fiscal strategy paper to be presented to the Assembly, and then also the medium-term expenditure framework. Now the Constitution actually wants both of them to work together. But the issues are deeper than that. It's deeper because, as the President has pointed out by coming out now to the public, he's questioned the quality of the projects that are imported into the budget by the National Assembly. And that is just right. Secondly, the National Assembly says there is an issue of legitimacy. They believe that they represent the people, and so they are in a position to articulate the needs. The word is needs of the people. So they have their own separate procedure. They take their complaints from the people, they go out to look at the people, their constituency, and then they have their own internal system of working up their own needs assessment, and then inputting them into projects and launching them into the budget. On the other hand, the executive has its own elaborated procedure where they have a strategic plan, which is economic recovery and growth plan. They populated those with projects based on performance criteria, 6 pillars and 60 policy action areas, now developed into performance indicator, and then take projects and then look at the strategic fitness of projects to those outputs and performance indicators, and then come up with a selection criteria, and then upload the projects into the budget. So they have their own process, but Assembly have their own process. So what then happens is that when they now come, the issue is, at what stage do you really involve the Assembly in your own process? You see the point? We involve them on FSP, the strategy paper, the MTEF framework, but in the actual strategy and projects that come in, they feel that they are not fully taken into confidence and into account. So that is the departure.
All right. Now, as it is, like just like you said, Prof.
The vice president is a legal luminary. He must deal with this matter as a matter of urgency.
Yes.
And then see that that they resolve this, because this is going to come into a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Exactly.
And see, what the president has actually done is to outline the entire dimensions of the challenge. But the vice president needs to take this up, because he's the legal mind in the cabinet there. So he needs to take this up and clear this up, because the issue is that the assembly believes that they are the custodians of a bottom-up budgetary process that is inclusive and needs-based and also participatory democracy. Then the government believes that they are the legitimate, of course, but the extent to which they both interact is a minefield.
It's all right. Well, the president has complained and expressed his reservation, but we wonder why they have not even gone to court to resolve these issues before now, like you said. But let's come to the issue of the budget itself. The president did not mince words in expressing how dissatisfied he is about the over 6,000 projects that were injected into this budget. And now he has also said that these projects certainly cannot be implementable.
Yeah.
So, is it clear from the beginning, from the start, that
will give you another perspective?
Yes, but is it clear from the start that this budget would not be effective?
Dead on arrival, more or less.
No, the president is very correct in what he's saying, because the president looks at his own system, which is an elaborate system of project selection, based on a strategy that is national strategy for economic recovery. And it's unfair that we as a country led by a government have developed a strategy for economic recovery and growth. And as a result of those, populated the budget with projects that are responsive to those strategic priorities and are accountable in terms of those performance indicators and outputs. And then only for 4,300 of these projects to be jettisoned by the National Assembly. So that's the government case. And what has happened is that there are even more examples that the president put on the table. The president is committed to rebuilding and refurbishing the UNDP building. Now, as a government, you could say that I want to exercise that right to do what I want to do. But you see the Assembly singing a different tone, that as far as they are concerned, you should be talking about counterpart funding to do this project. You are not richer than UNDP. So they're actually saying something different. They're saying that we only allow the counterparts, so that's why they're approving only 500 million instead of 5 billion. So there's a fundamental gap in the perceptions of both parties, and I think it's got to be resolved. It really has to be resolved, because they're operating. The Assembly says that the federal government is using a top-down approach, that irrespective of the strategy that informs this, that this PAMSEC and the director sits in their office and writes all the projects and determines the project that has to happen up and down the country. And then when they bring them to them in the assembly, they are one-sided. They may only see zones. So they cannot see the federal character of the projects that come in. Neither could they see how representative. So they have their own point. And so this is why I'm saying that we need to bridge the gap. And one of the way to look this going forward is this. The Assembly says, look, we have House Committee for virtually every MDA. We do have. That should be the first point of cooperation and buy-in into whatever it is that you want to bring to us as projects. Apart from the strategy paper that we look at, apart from the medium-term expenditure framework we have looked at, whether or not we participated in the design and development of the economic recovery strategy is immaterial, because in the end of the day, you are going to come up with projects. We want to be involved in those project selections so that we can feed in what we have got through our own system, which is bottom-up, and yours is top-down. So both have to meet. That's the point.
And that's really the point. How do you achieve that convergence between that bottom-down and, down-up, system in a way that both sides will be satisfied in such a way that it will, at the end of the day, be to the benefit of Nigerians? The national budget of
Absolutely.
yes, of Nigeria is barely 10% of the aggregate spending in the economy. 10%, barely 10%.
No.
The rest, of course, is driven by the private sector and all of that. Why is this budget so important that it almost puts everything on hold? Both the private sector performance and, of course, government delivering on the deliverables of government. Why is this budget so important?
Well, no, the budget is very important because it is a catalyst. Now, if you look at, even though it's just less than 10% of the GDP, but government spending crystallizes many other commitments. For example, private sector are getting involved in many aspects of our infrastructure and justification. But insofar as government is concerned, sometimes they require some counterpart from government, and then for them, even the external loans, much of the external loans require some counterpart from government. So 15% at most, but you have to bring down that 15%, and you can't bring a penny unless it is appropriated by the National Assembly. So there are such severe consequences for trying to do anything to fast track. And secondly, there has to be a procurement process. So whatever it is that has been approved or whatever has to go into procurement. So all of this delay, they compound the challenge of economic recovery and the macroeconomic financial management. So, but the issue is still back to the Constitution, because it is the whole element. The Constitution actually wants both parties to collaborate. But the thing is, while the instruments that allow the collaboration, Fiscal Strategy Paper, MTEF, the Fiscal Responsibility Act, all the requirements, all of that, the Assembly says that their involvement is predicated on the grassroots feedback. So they are the custodians of what the needs are on the ground. And they want to import. Look at, for example, constituents write letter to them. This road, this is that, this is abandoned. And they go out and investigate. And then they take their petition forward and they discuss it and make pass resolutions and then import it into their own holistic budgetary framework, which does not resonate with what the federal government is doing. So, and government has its own process. And so the issue is that how long is the budgetary participatory process?
Exactly.
It starts and ends with government and the assembly, or does it extend to the grassroots?
Before we went on that short break here, you were talking about the legislature being the people on the grassroots, and they receive petitions from their constituents sometimes. And now in that window, we wonder where constituency projects to which they receive funds from, where they lie in all of this. But let me ask you this question. The president has said that there will likely be a supplementary budget at the end, and he requested there to be an expeditious passage of that budget. Now, looking at what we have now, how sure are we that there won't still be the issue of disagreements in that supplementary budget?
What you have is a fundamental flaw in the understanding of what the Constitution provides and in the practice of what people believe is what their roles are in the Constitution. You can continue to postpone the judgment day, but it is there and it has to be addressed. What the president has done is to lay out his case loud and clear, and he did an excellent job of it. What I am saying is that the vice president is in charge of our economy. Let him take this matter, and we are so lucky that we have a legal luminary like himself. Let him treat this matter with dispatch and with the urgency that it requires to settle it once and for all. But in the meantime, if over the last 6 years I've been warning both tiers of government and they haven't done anything, it means that they prefer political horse trading. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because look at the moment that we are facing, going for a new election, and look at where they are threatening impeachment on the government. So it becomes very difficult for anybody to see the whole issue with a very clear eye. The issue is very clear to me. The legitimacy, the law wants both parties to work together. But how far in working together can that be? Assembly says it should go as far as the grassroots. The second thing is, what kind of budgeting procedure? The government is top-down, the assembly is bottom-up. The assembly have two separate, they have a procedure. for projects that enter into their fray. Government has a separate procedure for projects that hit in. Government's own procedure, I can describe to you, begins from policy and strategy, as you have, which is the ERGP strategy, which involved all parties, national, broad, and then as a result of that, they have performance indicators. Projects are selected against this across the MDAs, and when they do a short list of projects, they take those that more closely match what they are attempting to achieve, and they send them into the budget frame. And then come and look at what 4,000 of them were thrown away by the National Assembly.
Professor
so you can see the crisis. The National Assembly now comes up with its own procedure and brings 6,000 projects into the budgetary frame.
It truly is a crisis. Professor Ken Ife, you wonder whether the legislature is saying that the executive has failed and so it has to step in. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on the show.
I don't think so. I don't think it is about failing, to be honest.
All right.
Let me tell you something. You look at the oversight function. The oversight function is the Assembly wants to make it clear that they are not a rubber stamp. And they've always said it across the various regimes since 1999. They are not a rubber stamp. In their oversight function, or looking at projects, they actually go out to their constituency to check whether the projects
all right, we'll have to leave it there.
Let's yes, Prof.
happened on the ground.
All right, Prof. Thank you so much. Let's leave it here now. Thank you very much, Professor Ken Ife, development economist, for talking to us this morning. Thank you.